folks, as you're entering the room. We'll give it one more minute and then we will get started. All right, looks like we're good to go here. Welcome, everyone. It is another installation of Coffee Chats with Economic Alliance Snohomish County. I'm your host, Gary Clark, President and CEO of Economic Alliance Snohomish County. And we are delighted to bring you one quick reminder, which is as you join us today via Zoom, please mute yourself upon entering the room and drop your name and organization in the chat. We'd like to know who you are and who you're with. And tell us something special that you like about the port in your chat, so we can follow that as well. Additionally, as an economic development enterprise, the Port of Everett is always looking for ways to leverage the tools and resources unique to the port districts to bring economic opportunity and added value to the communities it serves. During the port's strategic plan outreach in 2018 and 2019, the port sought public feedback to help set a roadmap for the next decade of port initiatives. During public engagement, the port heard interest in expanding port boundaries linked to a desire to see the port's strategic investments in infrastructure improvements stretch into other parts of Snohomish County. While many large ports in Washington state are county-wide, the Port of Everett is not. Currently, the port's boundaries encompass most of Everett, portions of Mukilteo, and small parts of unincorporated Snohomish County and Marysville, in the Marysville area, with about 110,000 residents currently. To put this in perspective, with nearly 830,000 residents and counting, only about 15% of the county has port resources available to them. Ports are limited in their ability to invest in areas outside of their boundaries. This restricts how the Port of Everett can partner with neighboring communities to invest in their specific economic and community priorities, whether that be transportation improvements and close to home job opportunities or quality of life enhancements by way of community revitalization, mixed use, recreational amenities, environmental initiatives, and more. Given these limitations and the initial community interest, the Port Commission tasked staff with taking a more formal look at the topic of boundary expansion, including an economic value study and legal assessment of what it would take to expand. And more importantly, a community assessment to see if and where port partnership is desired. As part of this exploratory effort, the Port of Everett joins us today to share insights and answer your questions regarding the possible boundary expansion. Representing the port today is the outstanding CEO of the Port of Everett, Lisa Lefebvre. Lisa, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Gary, and welcome everybody. Appreciate your time this morning. And I just want to say on behalf of the port, I really appreciate these coffee chats. It's nice to be able to get information and in a Zoom setting and have it be kind of a topic specific. So thought this was a perfect opportunity to help get the word out about the effort that the port is undertaking. So if I can share my screen here.
Absolutely.
I will get us in business here. So can you guys all see this? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So today we're here to talk about exploring beyond our boundaries and seeing if the community wants to seal the deal and having a larger port district. That's my dad joke for the day. We actually sat for a long time trying to figure out what image do we use to capture the Port of Everett. And it's tough because the port can do so many different things. As Gary mentioned, from trade to mixed use to marina facilities to environmental stewardship, wildlife rehabilitation. The list goes on. And so we landed with the seal because I thought it was cute. Okay, let me advance my slide here. Oh, there we go. Sorry, operating error. So a little bit about the Port of Everett. We are as Gary mentioned, we're not a countywide port. We're one of two ports in Snohomish County. Both our boundaries are relatively small. Ports were created through the Port District Act in 1911. We were the sixth port created under that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We are governed by 3 elected commissioners that serve 6-year terms, and that governance structure changes depending on your port size. We are a special purpose district, so our job is to create jobs and economic opportunity and reinvest our resources in the community. We support about 40,000 jobs in the region, along with a significant amount of state and local taxes. We operate 3 lines of business. We have our international seaport. We have the largest public marina on the West Coast with 2,300 slips, along with jetty island and boat launch facilities. And then we have quite a bit of real estate. We're doing a mixed use redevelopment in Everett, working on one in Mukilteo, and have a lot of other opportunities to grow in that respect. We are home port to Naval Station Everett. Naval Station Everett actually used to be Portland, and we sold it to the Navy in the late 1980s to be able to support mission readiness in the event of a major conflict, and it was the newest Navy base built at the time. We also are I always say we're small but mighty. We have a very large export footprint. So we are the 2nd largest export district in the state and the 5th largest on the West Coast, because we bring in all the aerospace parts for the Boeing company and support all of their airplane programs, as well as military cargoes. We are the 3rd largest container port in the state, and it's a distant 3rd, but as Congressman Larson once told me, a bronze is a bronze. And then we recently got strategic seaport designation to be able to mobilize and demob military cargoes in and around our nation. We're one of only 18 ports that can do that. So why was the port created the way it was? This was something that has been on my mind for a very long time because I couldn't quite figure it out. But through this outreach process, we've met with all the cities and the tribes and local jurisdictions and the auditor's office, and was able to find out why. So interestingly, the Port of Everett was put out on June 8th, 1918 as a countywide port. And the whole reason that the community was trying to do this is that they were trying to take advantage of wartime economic opportunities to bring shipbuilding and jobs to Snohomish County. Unfortunately, the initiative failed in June by like 40 votes at the time. So a very, very small margin. Instead of trying to rework it, what the people who was organizing it at the time, and I don't know if it was the port or if it was the community, they essentially repackaged the boundaries based on the areas that overwhelmingly approved the port district and literally put it out the very next month, and it passed overwhelmingly. So that's how our boundaries are the way they are. It's also why they don't make any sense. So that was interesting to know. As Gary mentioned, the port right now takes in less than 15% of the county. We are not allowed to invest resources outside of our boundaries. And as a port in the county that's the most trade-dependent county in the state, we've got over 60% of our jobs are tied to trade, manufacturing, economic development, compared to the state that is 40%. So it's a very big maritime focused community. We were actually doing an assessment for an economic development project we were working on, and the company wanted to know, it was a maritime company, and they wanted to know if they relocated out of Seattle, what is the culture in Snohomish County? And interestingly, the #1 industry and theme in this area is maritime and manufacturing. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit. So port was created in July 1918 to take advantage of World War I activities, and then almost immediately the armistice happened, the war ended, and the port was looking at, okay, well now what do we do? And the very first thing the port did was build the Mukilteo ferry terminal. Ports have a lot of different authorities. We can build ferry terminals, marine facilities, industrial parks, transportation improvements. Really, I have yet to find a project that the port authorities don't allow us to invest in. So you can see the history. We actually opened the first airport in Snohomish County in 1928, which is now Highway 529 on the mudflats between Everett and Marysville. We built our seaport. The Navy actually took over our facilities again during World War II. And so that's why a lot of our marina related facilities and development is down here at Waterfront Place. And you can just see the history over the years. We've been anything that the community in our current port district boundaries needed from an economic development standpoint to advance whatever industry the community was trying to attract or had come into the community, the port made investments to support that. So back in the day, it was a lot of lumber and shingle, boat building, and commercial fishing. Today, it's a lot of commercial fishing, boat building, and aerospace. Lumber and shingle is pretty much all but gone by the wayside. That really took a turn in the with the spotted owl in the 70s and 80s. But we've just worked on revisioning where can we invest our dollars that grow the community. And this is some examples of the projects, and we'll get this out to you, or I'm sure can put it on the website or what have you, so you can read it in more detail. But our strategic plan has mirrored the economy in which we operate. So these are just some of the tools that we have. We've got foreign trade zone capabilities, and when there was not a lot of tariffs and so forth on goods coming into the United States, that wasn't a big deal. Now that there's a lot of tariffs on goods in different countries, a lot of our warehousing and distribution centers, you know, at the airports and at Cascade Industrial Center have expressed a lot of interest in having access to that ability. Snohomish County and was identified as one of the routes for a fast ferry route. We can do things like that. And a lot of communities have expressed a strong interest in grant funding for transportation projects, being able to get over that last hoop with funding overruns and so forth, so these critical transportation projects can move forward. That's another area that we can partner with. And then obviously on a national level, the port has a lot of advocacy arms and has a pretty good track record of driving investment into our district through federal dollars. Interestingly, ports are different throughout the nation. For example, in Massachusetts, it's a statewide port authority. California, they're part of their cities and counties. Georgia, it's part of their state. So they all differ depending on how their state was set up, but ours was set up as a special purpose district. And there are 75 ports in the state. And a lot of people think that if you're a port, you have to be by water. But only about 10 of the ports in Washington state, of those that touch the harbor, the rest of them are all land-based or river-based, and they invest in their communities based on what's important to them. So for example, Walla Walla, I'm sure you guys have all been there, wine tasting. The port's building incubators for wine industry. There's just a lot of different examples of how even rural areas use it in Woodland down south, their port is investing in broadband because they can't serve the industry because there's no backbone infrastructure for fiber. So their port is building that. And so our authorities are very unique in the sense that they allow us to invest in infrastructure, environment, and public access that advances job creation and the community goals. So we are not like a city or a county. We operate like a private business. So all of our operations are self-funded. And actually, a lot of our operations investment is reinvested in the community. So it's a private, essentially like a public-private organization. So for example, my salary, none of that's paid by any public investment. All public investment only goes to capital projects, public access, and environmental remediation. So I think that's an important distinction. Right now, ports are the smallest taxing district in all of Snohomish County. So the average homeowner pays about $100 a year in port taxes. But for every $1 that we invest in the community, it creates about $7 worth of value on the back end for business and economic development. So we talked through this. Tourism is becoming a big item. Obviously, Snohomish County, the two largest employers are the U.S. Navy base and the Boeing Company. They are critically important to the port and how we serve them. Almost all of our investments in our trade facilities are tied to supporting those two largest employers. But there's also a second element in Snohomish County that's critical, and it's tourism. Tourism is, I think, the second largest job center in Snohomish County, by way of, you know, the mountains, the water, and so forth. We do quite a bit of that. So here is a map showing the countywide ports. So Seattle and Tacoma, which are our, you know, obviously partners to the south, they are countywide ports. Snohomish County does not have, as we talked about, a strong port because we are not countywide. Means we can't invest in communities like Snohomish, who has in the past reached out to Washington Public Ports Association inquiring about how do you create a port, or you know, any of the other communities that have transportation needs or economic development needs. So I find this interesting because a lot of people have asked the same question: why were our boundaries created the way they were? Which obviously we've figured out now. But every 50 years, this topic comes back up. So the port was created in 1918. In the 1970s, there was an effort to expand the port to countywide. I'm trying to get clarity, but I don't think it ever went out for a vote. And now 50 years again, we're back here having the same discussion. And that's one of the reasons the commission put it in their strategic plan is we've been talking about this for a long time. Let's find out what the community thinks, what the community needs, and whether or not the public would like to support it. This is just a map of our current boundaries. We have Commissioner David Simpson, Tom Steiger, and Glenn Bachman, who represent the port district now. If the port were to expand, the governance structure would change. It would be required to be 5-member commission, 4-year terms. And the commission only hires one person. They hire the executive director, which is me, who then hires the staff and runs the operation. So it's a little bit different than other government entities. So this is a map that shows the city limits as it relates to, so the city limits as it relates to the Port District. So you can see it's doesn't take all of Everett in. It doesn't take all of Mukilteo. It splits. For those that live in Mukilteo, it's Chenault Beach Road. One side's in the Port District, the other side's not. We actually had a commissioner that had to resign because she bought a house, what she thought was in the district, but it turned out to be one block too far out of the district. And so it's those kinds of little nuances that have created trouble with the boundaries not making too much sense. So this is the effort that we went through with the community in 2018, really looking at, what are the limitations, what are current authorities, how can we grow those as all of our real estate starts to get built out and planned for? Where's the future? Where are we going to invest next? Obviously, there's still a significant amount of investment in our current Port District, which we're working through and working toward. But the port has been here for 105 years and will continue to be here, and looking to invest in the growing Snohomish County. So this is a map that shows essentially the whole county and where the Port of Everett is. I want to make a specific note that we are not exploring Port of Edmonds area. We are staying out of Edmonds city limits altogether. So that wouldn't be part of this process. So what would it take? The areas have to be contiguous, so you couldn't jump communities. They have to, all the boundaries have to touch. And interestingly, if it were a city, the third largest city in Snohomish County would be unincorporated Snohomish County. There's a very large portion of Snohomish County that's unincorporated. So once we would identify what the proposed expansion area is, the Port Commission would have to vote to send it to the county council, who then would have to put it on the ballot. I expect, and they would have to pass by 50%. Current Port District residents cannot vote. It's only the people in the expanded area. And then the governance structure, which I mentioned earlier, that would be a follow-on discussion. So it's a two-step process. So if the community said, yes, we would like the port to expand into our area, the very next step would be establishing the governance structure and then commissioner elections, which would take place the following year. Just as a point of reference, governance structures for countywide or mostly countywide port districts vary. Seattle and Tacoma are at large, so all of their commissioners can be from anywhere in the county. There's no districts. Others have 3 districts and 2 at large. So there's going to be a follow-on discussion if this were to move forward. So we are right now in the outreach phase. Our team has put together a community survey to find out what people think of having their port be able to invest in their community. And those survey results, and I'll get to that slide in a minute, will be through November 26th. We're going to analyze that feedback, and my expectation is to make a recommendation to the commission in December on whether or not we advance this to the next step. And this is the survey here. So far, Kat, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as of yesterday, we had 650 people fill out the survey. I'm guessing it's probably more today.
100 at this point, but we need more.
How much?
700.
700. Okay. Yeah. So it's a good turnout. We're taking not only Port District residents feedback, or potential expanded Port District residents feedback, but also businesses, because businesses have a big say in, how communities are developed and, how people can maybe get closer to their work and not drive into Seattle in traffic every day. So that's the goal. Whether the expansion moves forward or not, that's the port's goal, is to try to create jobs and economic opportunity in Snohomish County so that we can keep our jobs in our county. So that's a quick overview of the initiative that we're moving forward with in the outreach process right now. And I think, I should just end by, if this were to be approved, the very first thing the port would do is revisit our strategic plan. One of the nice things about this community survey is we're asking people, what's an important economic development or community investment in your city, in your town, in where you live or where you work? And that's going to be really helpful information in building out a modified strategic plan to take into account investment outside our current port district boundaries. So that would be another follow-on that would run parallel with the governance structure conversation. Okay, I think, do we have any questions, or that concludes my report?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for providing that presentation. I think it was very informative. And we do have one initial question. It's from Matt Smith, who asked, basically, if the countywide vote supports the effort, can a specific city choose to not join? So is that a possibility?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's got to be contiguous. So that's a good question. So the way the legislature set up the process is that the Port Commission acts, then it goes to the county council, they act. The cities don't individually act on a port district, which is one of the reasons that we've been meeting with all the different cities to explain how that process would look and what it means.
Okay. All right. And then we have another question from John. As the area's two largest employers, having Boeing and Naval Station Everett expressed any interest about the port achieving countywide status? So have they expressed the interest, I guess?
So we are still in that outreach process. From a practical standpoint, our major investments in our international trade facilities are tied to those two assets. Our primary focus has been talking with the cities and the county and the tribes to make sure that we've done the community outreach on areas that would be expanded into. We've done some outreach to the current port district businesses, but not formal at this point.
Thank you. Well, Lisa, will the proposed boundary impact ownership of land and water?
No, it doesn't impact any ownerships. Okay. It's just a blanket. It's basically a blanket authority that allows us to make investments in communities. We would only make investments in communities where it was part of our strategic plan or the community asked us to invest. We get this a lot is, if the port district expanded, does that mean that the port would automatically take on the airport or, things like that? And that's not the case at all. The only way we would get involved in anything other than what we're doing now is if a city or a county or a tribe wanted us to help invest in their community.
Okay. So with that in mind, would a port property tax extend into an expanded boundary area with that property?
Yes, so it would expand. And as I mentioned, we're the smallest taxing district in the county. Interestingly, a lot of people already think they're in the Port District because when they get their tax bills, it says Port and it has the pie chart on that little postcard. Because I obviously live in Snohomish County and see it all the time. And I'm like, wait, I'm not in the Port District. But it would expand. And as I mentioned earlier, though, we operate like a private business. So none of that new public investment would go to any port operations. It would all be reinvested in capital.
All right. All right. I have another question about city councils. Will city councils within a proposed boundary vote on an expanded port district?
They would not. No. So it is purely the Port Commission and the County Council who sends it to the vote of the people. And then it's incumbent upon the people to decide if they want to be in the Port District.
Okay, thank you. And how would the boundary expansion of the Port of Everett impact the economic development and job opportunities in Snohomish County?
So you can see what the port has done on a small scale. In the port, having a larger boundary would increase our bonding capacity, as well as our investment to be able to create jobs and other opportunities. So, for example, as I mentioned, transportation is a huge issue. Port of Seattle and Tacoma, they offer transportation grants. You know, there could be an opportunity to do matching grant funds. We've done that with the city of Everett, where we've provided, you know, $400,000 to a study so that they can help improve transportation in the area. So, you know, I don't have a crystal ball on what I think the community may need down the road, but having the ability to invest in their economic development needs is a tool that they don't have right now.
All right, all right. I have another question in the chat. Do you have an estimate of the property tax bill for those that would join the district? I'm sure that's probably something that you're thinking about, but may not have the answer yet. But.
Yeah, we don't have it because we don't know the assessed value. So, for example, that home values went down this year. So our you know, most of the time our millage rate is going down. So the bigger your assessed value, the lower your millage rate. So the expectation is that the millage rate would go down from 18 cents right now. And the current Port District residents, it would go down because they'd be part of the larger area. That's my expectation on how just we've seen millage rates work with assessed value, but I don't have that number. I could tell you it would be less than 18 cents that it is now, so.
All right, great answer. And then what specific infrastructure improvements or investments does the port plan to make within the expanded boundary, and how might these benefit local businesses and residents?
So we haven't, you know, obviously I mentioned we're going to be doing if this were to pass, we would do a strategic plan. So we would reach out to the cities and again, reach out to the cities and the businesses and really find out what's important to them and then build a plan around that. I can tell you the two of the most effective things that I think that Seattle and Tacoma offer their business community and their cities is these grant programs where they can help fund transportation programs through, you know, grants. They small business grants to be able to help downtowns, you know, be able to do small business grants to help with whatever they do. We do that on a small scale now for tourism. That's another area that can be expanded is, you know, let's say that there's an event in Snohomish or Monroe that needs tourism infusion. We would likely expand that grant program because right now it's pretty narrow to our area. So we invest in waterfront events in Everett and Mukilteo, but we're not allowed to invest our money outside to other events at this time.
All right. And you kind of gave an example of another port. So this kind of leans into this question. Examples of other ports who have given or expanded their boundaries and how that's benefited their respective communities. Anything that you think is just an excellent example of what you've seen?
So there's never been, as far as I know, there's never been a port that has gone through this process. So this is groundbreaking. It's never been done before, from what I can find. Now, there have been mergers. So Chelan and Douglas County in Eastern Washington, they knew if they merged and leveraged each of their respective authorities, they could build a stronger port. And I'll tell you, they've gotten a lot of federal investment by doing that. Same with Seattle Tacoma. They've merged their marine elements into the Northwest Seaport Alliance, and they've been very successful in driving additional investments to their community. I think they just got a $56 million transportation grant through port infrastructure funds. And that's another element that we have access to, is all these federal port funds and loan programs that are traditional to ports as opposed to general municipalities.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, that sounds like we are going to do some groundbreaking work here if it gets approved. So with that in mind, then, what is the port's plan outside of the survey and engagement to engage the community on the expansion effort and how they can address and issue to ensure that people's concerns are met by the residents at least?
So once the decision is made, one way or another, I mean, obviously, if the commission says, based on the feedback we received through survey, we're not going to pursue it, it stops, right? The decision's been made, we can move on with our lives. If the commission, based on the feedback, says, yeah, let's let them vote. And then we would go into an information session where we would essentially incorporate this port information in all of our community presentations. So whether it's the chambers or the neighborhood groups or business community, EASC, we would continue to inform people on how the process is evolving and what the next steps are, similar to how we've done now.
Okay. And another question in the chat, what is the timing, and if approved, when do we see the bill?
See, like it's the tax bill?
I believe that's what's being asked, I think, is when would that highlight it? It's from Matt Smith. Let's see if we followed up there.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So if this were to move forward, it would likely move forward next year. Probably I don't know when the primary is, but we were, originally we were thinking if we were going to do this, we wanted it to stand on its own 2 feet and be a special initiative on a special ballot. And then we found out that it'd be like $1 million to put it on the ballot, and that is just not reasonable.
Yeah.
So we have to put it on, well, I guess we don't have to, but we are going to put it on with a county-wide race so that it's less expensive to place it on the ballot. And then it'd be 2025 before anyone would see, assuming it was approved, anything on their tax bills.
But with that in mind, Lisa, that's a great answer. With this being an expanded result of increasing the tax revenue for Snohomish County, how would we see that benefit the community after the fact? So once that expansion happens, where does that money flow, or what ideas do you think will be beneficial?
Yeah, so I'll just give you a prime example for the port today, right? So today we're presenting on our budget for the port. It's about a $95 million budget. 54 million of it is operating revenues. The rest of it is being invested into capital projects. So about over $30 million in capital projects. The port right now gets somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.9 to $5 million a year in taxes. So our operations annually subsidize more than 90% of our capital investment.
Okay.
So if this were expanded, the public investment would expand and our investment from our operations back into capital would continue.
Okay, I do see another question that I may have overlooked in the chat. It asks, how can Coffee Chat participants help the POE with this expansion? So they'd like to know how they can help you.
I think just, we are in a information sharing mode. And so I think that anything that if you feel like you want to get involved, I think talk to Economic Alliance and see how maybe that can be supported. But a lot of people are interested. I think ports are a bit of a mystery to people, and a lot of people think that ports are only water-based. And so I think just helping educate the people that on what the port is, what the port does, and how this possible expansion could benefit investment in their community.
Excellent. And I have another question here. It says Kitsap County had 12 ports and Grant County has 10. Why not have new, smaller areas develop ports?
Well, this is my personal opinion, but by having so many ports in Washington State, it's great for the communities in which they serve. But it does weaken the strength of our larger metropolitan areas. So if Seattle had 10 different ports, they wouldn't compete on a national level for funding as well as if it's the Port of Seattle. And the same is true for Snohomish County. So you could do that, but you would be watering down potential investment that could come to the port.
Okay, that's excellent. And I think we just have a few more questions on my list. And then, so if those of you who are on screen, if you haven't shared this out on your Facebook, please do. It's live on Facebook on Economic Alliance Snohomish County's Facebook. And also it will be shared again on YouTube later on. Lisa, I just have a few more questions for you. One is tied to construction contracts. What opportunities would be available for local businesses to participate with the benefit project as far as expansion and construction contracts or supply chain partnerships? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's, I think, one of the largest opportunities is because I mentioned our 3 lines of business, but we're really a development company, right? We build stuff. We build infrastructure and projects that benefit the community. And so we, right now I mentioned, we have anywhere between a 30 to last year, a $57 million capital budget. Most of those projects are over $1 million, which trigger our apprenticeship requirements. So we have a very strong apprenticeship program in our construction trades. And, we are required to low bid projects, but have a very good track record because we've got so many projects of having local investment by way of our company. So we've got one of our private partners has Gaffney Construction building one of our buildings and doing tenant improvements right now. And we've got Granite Construction and all of these businesses that are local to Snohomish County, they all invest and bid on port work. And that capital budget would grow because we are not allowed to use any public investment for operations or employee salaries. So it has to go back into the environment, the capital, and the public access.
Awesome. And I'm just going to go to one final question for you. Are there any potential drawbacks or challenges associated with the boundary expansion that the port anticipates, and what contingency plans are in place to address them?
So I think, change is difficult. We've been a smaller 3-member commission port for 105 years, right? The challenge I see is that by expanding the boundaries, you're increasing your governance structure, you're reducing your terms. So from a governance standpoint, I want to make sure that we don't get bogged down and are still able to deliver. So I think that's a key piece. And then just making sure we have really good lines of communication with all of our cities to make sure that we're investing in the right things. So obviously Kat and her team, that communication and outreach section of the port would grow. It would have to, because we need to make sure that we're not going to be able to invest in every single last, crevice of the county, but want to make sure we're investing in things that have links to all the different cities. Whether it's, someone mentioned 522 or Highway 530 or access roads to open up a industrial park in Lake Stevens. Those are the kinds of things that touch many people, even though it may not be in a particular area.
Okay, and I have my own question just tied to the amazing work that the Port of Everett has done over the last few years. Is there any project that you just want to highlight to the group or our business audience that you're really extremely excited about and proud of that's taken place recently or will take place?
Well, I always, Kat always laughs, but I consider myself a trade nerd. I love international trade. I think it's, there's not a port in the world that everyone's connected to other than the Port of Everett, because who hasn't been on a Boeing aircraft, right? So everyone in the world is connected to the Port of Everett in some way. So obviously all of our investments, we've invested $150 million in transportation infrastructure at the seaport to be able to support the military strategic seaport designation, as well as the larger 777X aerospace program. So I'm very proud of that. And then by doing that, we've created a revenue source that has allowed us to invest in Waterfront Place and the marina. And because the seaport does fund, as I mentioned earlier, seaport does fund a lot of the nice to haves. And so there's a connection between the two, right? So the stronger the seaport is, the more resources we have to invest in other areas of the district. And so Waterfront Place obviously is a very big pride point for us. It's a $1 billion mixed use redevelopment. We've been able to leverage a lot of private partners to invest in our community. And that's another thing that I think is a big asset of the port, is that we make deals, we bring investment into communities, because a lot of developers nationwide, when you think of a port, you think of development and jobs. Absolutely.
Well, Lisa, I think with that in mind, I want to give you the chance to kind of give some closing remarks to the audience, just to wrap this up, and really looking forward to seeing what happens with the exploration of the boundaries for the Port of Everett. So I'll give you just a final moment to give a closing remark, and then we'll move on from there.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate your guys' time today. You can see it's a little bit of a complex process and project. The port, we talk a lot about jobs and economic development, but as I mentioned, that's why we had such a hard time figuring out what photo to use, because we also just built, the largest salmon habitat recovery project by breaching the dikes for blue heron slough, and those juvenile salmon are going to be strong enough to be able to go out for our orcas. And so there's all of these nuances that, if it's tied to our investment, we have a lot of flexibility to make a real big difference in communities based on what their needs are. I just would ask if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or our staff. This has never been done before, as I mentioned before, so this is all new to us too. But we've been talking about this since I've been at the port, which is almost 20 years now. And I am of the opinion that I don't like to talk, I like to do. And so if we need to, you know, get to a yes or get to a no, but we need to do something. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Lisa. Lisa's also on the Board of Trustees for EASC, and is also, she mentioned, Port of Everett has invested in organizations like ours and others across the county. And so I really want to thank you for your leadership and your dedication to this effort, and especially the commissioners who collaborate and your team. So thank you, Lisa. Again, folks, this has been another installation of Coffee Chats with EASC. If you registered via the Eventbrite option, check your inbox today for a list of resources connected to this conversation by Lisa and the Port of Everett. As there will be a link as well for the recording. You should be able to rewatch it or share it out however you like. And again, this email will also include a link to the survey. So if you haven't filled in that Port of Everett survey, please look for that as well. And before we go, we want to highlight a few events coming up. And actually this week, it is actually exciting to know that we have the State of the Station. That's right. It's going to be coming up on the 9th, and it's actually from 12:30 to 2 p.m. It's the Bayside Ballroom, and it's at the Port of Everett at Hotel Indigo. So it's at the Everett waterfront. And folks, if you have that QR in front of you, you can scan it. Again, Naval Station Everett, State of the Station, presented by the Port of Everett. So we want to thank you all for that. And then additionally, we have another coffee chat coming up. It's December 12th, and it's the end of year tax planning and business succession discussion. And it'll be December 12th from 8:30 to 9:30. Again, you can scan that. The company that will be associated with that will be Moss Adams. So again, want to thank you all for joining us today. And let's show Lisa and the port how we do our coffee chats at the end. Folks, if you would please grab your coffee cups or whatever you attempt to have. We'll go to gallery view. And if you've been off screen, jump on screen. Grab your coffee cups. We want to thank Lisa Lefevre and her staff at the Port of Everett for the amazing work and impact that they've done over the years, 100 plus years, 100 years almost. And we really would like to also highlight the fact that today is a Tuesday, and even if it's not sunny outside, it's sunny right here. So again, Lisa, thank you again for giving us amazing input. Folks, have an amazing day. And again, the Port of Everett is doing great things in Snohomish County. Thank you.
Thank you.